Andy Kotelnicki's play calling was not as bad as everyone's making it out to be.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show. Happy New Year to each and every one of you. I didn't think Andy Kotelnicki's play calling was that bad. We're going to talk about that, plus the play of the passing attack, Drew Allar, the wide receivers, the ground game, Thunder and Lightning, Kaytron, Allen, Nicholas Singleton. Also talk about the offensive line because Boise State's pass rush was alive and fairly active. And we'll also talk about the defense a little bit. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section, beginning with Andy Kotelnicki's play calling. I personally did not think it was terrible as everyone made it out to be. Were there questionable decisions at times? Yes. Is this uncharacteristic to an extent for Andy Kotelnicki, who has been so good? I was seeing comments, Andy Kotelnicki's overrated. No wonder he didn't get head coaching jobs. It's like, really? Because of a couple questionable play calling decisions here and there? You also have to look at it as far as execution. There are layers to this. There are more elements to this than, okay, on 3rd and 1, why aren't you just running it up the middle? Well, Boise State certainly made adjustments. They were preparing for that. Andy Kotelnicki is also thinking, hey, with explosive plays that Boise State surrenders, we can really take this game and run away with it. And sometimes the Broncos defense just stepped up in the moment. I think of the Tyler Warren screen where it was the throwback pass and Warren had some blockers. And hey, Boise State was all over it. Boise State was all over it. They were prepared for certain run plays. The pass rush was able to be effective at times. But yes, simplistically, would you like Penn State to run the football on 3rd and 1? Absolutely. But sometimes it isn't that obvious. And Penn State, at the end of the day, still had 31 points. Let me talk about that execution part of it. Andy Kotelnicki had good plays, had good setups. Everything leads to another. It's not necessarily as black and white as people might want to make it seem it is that way, but every play is to set up another adjacently. So what that means is Andy Kotelnicki is calling a play to set up an even bigger play on that same drive or maybe for the next one as well. It's like a domino effect, if you will. And Penn State's players also have to execute. I think of the plays specifically at the end of the first half. Now, this doesn't have to necessarily do with, okay, that domino effect, but it has to do with the fact that not the entire time, Penn State's offense just wasn't finishing. That's really what it boiled down to sometimes, was that Penn State's offense was not finishing. Amari Evans had an opportunity to have a touchdown reception at the end of the first half. Trey Wallace also had the opportunity to do the same thing. Drew Allar was placing the football on some tough throws in some tight windows, and receivers just weren't making the catches. Even Tyler Warren, somewhat guilty of that, not egregiously, and neither were Evans and Wallace to an extent, but there were select plays where it's, okay, that's not Andy Kotelnicki's fault. He put them in a position to succeed, and the offense didn't follow through. Also the fumble. Penn State's up 14-0. And on that option read play where Drew is going to keep it, or maybe he's giving it off to Singleton, we don't know what the miscommunication was, but it ends up being a fumble when you really could have taken Boise State out of the game early on and made it 21-0. And that did not happen. So there are elements to it. Boise State is also making adjustments. Boise State's defense is not incompetent. They know what they're doing. They have solid playmakers, clearly not to the extent of Penn State. And then allow me to point this out as well, is that Penn State is also thinking a little bit long-term here. You don't need to run every single play in the arsenal against Boise State. And there are also formations and motions and certain types of personnel that you want to show a future opponent and put that on tape almost as a decoy. James Franklin has admitted this. This is why I'm saying it now in the podcast, is that every play call has an intention. I'm not saying that Penn State is putting out fake game plans and fake plays just to try to trick Notre Dame and Georgia in the semifinal. But my point is that every play has a purpose, and it's not necessary. And you can't always just say, okay, we're going to halfback dive on this play. Yes, it might work, but there's also something that you want to show in terms of personnel, in terms of motion, in terms of the formation that you want to give to Notre Dame and Georgia for them to prepare for whatever that next opponent is. Semifinal, championship, the entire season, that's how Penn State has operated, and they're not going to stop now. And then there are certain plays that you don't want to show, that you want to keep in your back pocket for those games because you know that they're going to be better suited against different types of opponents. So yes, on 3rd and 1, a quarterback sneak, a halfback dive up the middle makes a lot of sense, but there are so many elements and every play call is conscious because there are other things in the background that I guess aren't always going to be considered. And it's tough to think about that in the moment. I'm not afraid to admit that, but I don't think Andy Kotelnicki had a terrible day calling plays. Were they questionable at times? Sure. But was it the worst in the world? Absolutely not. But that's my reasoning behind Andy Kotelnicki. Was it his best game play calling? Probably not. It could have been better, but the offense was still able to move the football effectively. There were times when they could have had more and the players did not finish a play, and you can't really blame that on the offensive coordinator. So now let's pivot to the actual performances of the players, because I liked what I saw from the running backs, but we have to start with Drew Allar, of course. Drew Allar finishing this game 13 of 25, started out very, very hot. I think he was 10 of 14, and then ultimately finished with just over a 50% completion percentage, which doesn't look great, but he had 3 touchdown passes. Boise State's pass rush was in his face. Where I will give Drew Allar credit is that the box score is not going to look pretty. 13 of 25, 117 yards, does have the 3 touchdowns. But may I remind everybody that Drew Allar, the one thing that you can pretty much always count on, except for a couple of instances, is that he is not going to turn the football over. And even when he does, it doesn't put Penn State in a position to lose games. So Penn State, Drew Allar is always protecting the football, always able to sustain drives, and just lives for the next play. That's what I like about most when it comes to evaluating Drew Allar as a quarterback, is that he just doesn't make that detrimental mistake. So they did have the fumble in that game, but that was a simple miscommunication. It wasn't a bad play by Drew. It wasn't a bad read by Drew. It was a simple miscommunication between him and Singleton. But for Drew Allar, I look at the fact that he made some big plays when there was pressure in his face, that he didn't fold when Boise State's pass rush, free blitzers were able to go after him. Let's talk about the play where Tyler Warren had his 2nd touchdown reception, and Drew basically sidearmed the throw and with pinpoint accuracy hit Warren in the back of the end zone. There are very few quarterbacks that can make that pass. That had little to no momentum. That was all hip. That was just all hip muscle, and he was able to deliver a strike to Warren in the end zone. There's little to no way you can do that. He was also taking a hit at the tail end of that play, and Drew Allar just said, I got to throw this the best that I can, and he did. So Allar's performance, the box score doesn't look pretty, but I like the way overall that he performed. If you actually watch the film, if you actually look at the tape instead of just looking at the box score, you're going to know that Drew Allar had a pretty effective game for Penn State, and always either keeps them in a position to be competitive or puts them ahead to win because he doesn't make that detrimental mistake. Seriously, he could have fumbled it a bunch more times because he took a lot of hits from those pressures. He was under duress, and no interceptions because I think a lot of other quarterbacks would have made those bad plays. Now let's talk about the dynamic duo of Kaytron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. Thunder and lightning. I mean, Kaytron Allen. We were having discourse about how Nicholas Singleton was starting to transcend and clearly distance himself as that clear-cut number 1 back, and it was Kaytron Allen that is now continuing to stack these performances. He has had the better games against Oregon, SMU, and now Boise State all consecutively. What does that mean for Penn State? Well, it's nothing but good news for the Nittany Lions. We'll talk about it more on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel. America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. You can bet on which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score. It's thrilling, but there's more than that. You can bet on how many passing yards a quarterback will have, how many rushing yards a running back will have, catches made, receiving yards, how many tackles are made, field goals are made. So many options. It's more than just money lines, spreads, and totals over at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's get back to the running backs and then talk about the pass catchers before we finish up with the offensive line. And just talking about how the defense stopped Ashton Jeanty, absolutely shut him down. So Nicholas Singleton, Kaytron Allen, they are playing their best football right now. And it is perfectly fitting, perfectly timed going into the postseason here. Because Kaytron Allen and Singleton certainly did not look like themselves throughout the regular season, had that sophomore slump, if you will. And we know that, hey, there were other offensive systematic issues. But now we're seeing Kaytron Allen and Nicholas Singleton truly at their best. And that's why it pays off having two running backs like that of their caliber. And Kaytron Allen is reminding us that he is a legitimate running back as well here at the Power 4 level. Look, I'm not afraid to admit when I was wrong, saying that Singleton starting to really distance himself. We know that he is the stronger running back, or just overall better running back. And is he faster? Is he quicker? Yes, but Kaytron Allen looks 110%. So does Singleton. And now you have that dynamic duo fully healthy, that 1-2 punch. And that's honestly something that we talked about, how Singleton questions about his health and everything else. And I think Kaytron Allen was playing through his fair share of bumps and bruises as well. Both of these guys look better than ever. They look healthier than ever, and it shows. And it goes back, was Andy Kotelnicki's play calling really that bad? Was it really that bad? Because this is a dynamic duo that was each averaging over 7 yards per carry. Kaytron Allen, 7.9 yards per carry. Nicholas Singleton, 7.3 yards per carry. Singleton had the long run to close out the game of 54 yards to score that touchdown. But it was that thunder and lightning that we are really used to. Allen, the thunder. And then lightning strikes with Singleton. 17 carries for 134 yards. Allen looks like he is in his prime again. He is playing some of his best football and is reminding everybody that he deserves a lot more respect here, that this is a 1A, 1B situation where you really can't go wrong with either running back. Both of them could handle the extended workload, but thank goodness you have both of them going into the postseason. And there is really nobody else that is comparable to Singleton and Allen. Because I want to be an objective sports reporter, or, sports talk show host to an extent, I do have to say the only team that has this luxury is Ohio State with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. There's a reason they went into the portal to go get a running back like Quinshon Judkins. But Penn State and Ohio State are the only teams that have this, where you can rely on having two elite playmakers at the running back position to create so much for you, to be able to sustain drives. You can use them. Both of them can be 3-down backs if you needed them to be, but you don't need them to be. And why it is so important to have running back depth down the stretch is because injuries do happen. Somebody else is going to have to pick up the slack. And it's essentially an insurance policy for Penn State. And that's why that they operate this way. And you still get a fair amount. You still get a split workload. Sometimes Allen's going to have maybe a few more carries than Singleton. Other days it's going to be the reverse, or somebody's going to be a little more involved in the passing game than others. And that's why you saw Singleton, finish with strong performances one day. And now Kaytron Allen is reminding us that, yes, he is just as good and just as effective. Singleton's better at some things, but Allen is certainly better at other things as well. We will see what the future holds for them, but right now in the postseason, Penn State couldn't be in a better spot with its running back room, the way that Allen and Singleton are operating as that. And I hate to say it as a 1-2 punch. It's a 1A, 1B punch, because really, no matter who Penn State throws out there, you get strengths, you get this playmaking ability that it complements what Penn State is trying to do offensively. And that's my point above all else. Going to the pass catchers. How do the pass catchers do? Because Penn State has really, they have shrunken how they are distributing the football. Only 4 players caught a pass against Boise State. Tyler Warren is doing what Tyler Warren does. He was the offensive player of the game for the Fiesta Bowl. 6 catches, 63 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Boise State did not have an answer for him. Was it that USC game, that hero type of game where he made 17 catches, 200 yards? And no, not necessarily, but when they needed him, Boise State could only stop him on a couple select times. Even when he was double covered, even when he was schemed away by Boise State, somehow Tyler Warren was still able to make a play and Drew Allar was still able to find him. I liked what I saw from Amari Evans and Trey Wallace. I pointed it out that Boise State's secondary wasn't going to be its best group. It was going to be one of the weaker links on the team. Are they still capable? Are they still, Division I football players? Yes, but we should have expected more from Trey Wallace and Amari Evans, and we got that to an extent. Again, Drew Allar only completed 13 passes in this game, so there were only 13 passes to be caught, and Tyler Warren still eats up a lot of the workload. But Amari Evans had that big play down the field for that second touchdown of the game. Honestly, should have had another touchdown. Trey Wallace should have had a touchdown. The wide receivers, yes, you want them to make the plays, but I like where they are. They are capable. They can do it. They are getting open. They are creating separation. But Penn State is just maximizing its strengths. You don't need to necessarily rely on Amari Evans and Trey Wallace and any of the wide receivers that would need to step up in this instance to take over a football game. You have Tyler Warren. I've been thinking about this. Coming off of the Rose Bowl, seeing what Jeremiah Smith did against that Oregon defense. Would it be nice for Penn State to have an elite caliber of a wide receiver? Yes. But then what is Tyler Warren? We can't pretend anymore. It's the wrong thing to say that, imagine if Drew Allar had an elite pass catcher. He does. It's just not in the form of your traditional wide receiver. It is Tyler Warren. Eventually, it might be Luke Reynolds next season. We saw Luke Reynolds get involved in the passing game. Khalil Dinkins, they ran those 3 tight end formations. Andy Kotelnicki will do whatever it takes to move the football effectively. If that means running 4 tight end formations, he will. Tight ends can be used as receivers. As we've seen with Tyler Warren, he has become that difference maker. So there is that elite pass catcher in this offense. Of course, you want the quantity of that though. Penn State's offense would be so much more dynamic if there was that second player that could take over ball games, but that's hard to come by. There are very few teams that can do that. But let's not talk about it. Let's focus on the fact that Penn State does have the talent. I just got done talking about Kaytron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. Tyler Warren. You just need to be able to get those guys the football in space. Does it matter if you hand them the football, a screen play, a downfield pass? I know everybody wants to talk about the wide receivers, but Penn State, this group of playmakers is good enough for a postseason run, and we've seen that as Penn State has now beaten back-to-back top 10 teams. Amari Evans and Trey Wallace were in positions to succeed. There were a couple plays where I would have liked, just, hey, hold on to the football there, but that's a tough catch in traffic. They're not asked to do that all that often, but I'm seeing positive progress. I thought Amari Evans had a good game for what it is worth. I thought Trey Wallace had a good game for what it is worth. I'm wondering, is Liam Clifford going to get factored in a little more? Is Julian Fleming? They haven't needed them. And that's not because they're not capable. It's because they haven't needed to go through the wide receiver depth chart and get all these players involved. Penn State's won these 2 games comfortably. You don't need to pass the football a ton when you are leading by 2 or 3 scores. So understand that there's a lot of game script involved here and that the wide receivers are doing well under the circumstances. Now, the offensive line. I have not seen that kind of pressure against Drew Allar in quite some time. I just got done singing the praises of Penn State's offensive line. How did they do? Because I was critical of them at first, and then watching it back, they had a pretty solid game. But where did they struggle? We'll talk about it more after a word from our sponsors. And today's show is also brought to you by Gametime. Attending the new 12-team college football playoff games is an incredible experience that brings fans together like never before. And the excitement of those past playoff games are now waiting to create new memories with this updated format and extra teams involved. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to these events even easier than before. What does Gametime Picks do? It filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on incredible seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. Now, personally, I've used the Gametime app before, and I like the Gametime Picks feature. It helps you find tickets for that upcoming game, and browsing through deals becomes a breeze. You can find great value on all kinds of seats at any venue. There's the super deal in particular that will give you the best value for an event. You can see the seats before buying. That's probably the best feature and the most convenient feature of it all, is that you see the view of your seats before you buy the tickets. And the app also shows you the cost up front, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, you have on-time ticket delivery and the lowest price guarantee that will give you complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So overall, I think the offensive line actually played pretty well because, Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen don't just average over 7 yards per carry each. Both of them each had 7 yards per carry or more. And the offensive line is a big part of that. So in the ground game, the way that they were able to have success against that Boise State defense, that's the front half of the defense that is respectable. They are good going into that game. Boise State's defense was allowing opponents to just 3.5 yards per carry. That's got to count for something. That's top 25 in the country. And for Penn State to just double that without any issue, the offensive line deserves credit for that. But I left just kind of sitting there watching the game. Pressure on Drew Allar a lot of the time. And that had to do with scheme. That had to do with play calling. I think there were some adjustments that could have been made. In pass protection, they were overwhelmed by the blitz. And if I'm Georgia or if I'm Notre Dame, whichever team or down the road, look at that Boise State game and know that you can dial up some blitzes to get pressure on Drew Allar effectively. And Drew's been so good at avoiding the pass rush. But Boise State did crack the code to an extent. Drew Shelton, Nick Dawkins, Sal Wormley, at times pass protection was a struggle. I do want to point this out though. Boise State was not getting home with organic pressure. When it was a 4-man rush, a 3-man rush, Drew Allar had time to sit back in the pocket. So the only thing that Penn State needs to adapt to, the only thing that Penn State's offensive line really needs to work on is just shoring up blitz protection. Making the proper calls, making the proper adjustments, and taking the right read. They know better than I do, but I'm just pointing it out as that Boise State's blitz packages did work, and they worked a little too effectively at times. So no, Penn State's offensive line didn't have a bad day. There are some areas that they need to clean up. Of course, that's the case after any game for any position group. There are some things to criticize, but overall, Drew Allar did have time when it was just a natural pass rush, and Singleton and Allen ate up that Boise State defense. The offensive line just needs to figure out how they're going to, because Georgia or Notre Dame is going to be able to get organic pressure. They are going to have more effective blitz packages in their own right because those are two better defenses. So Penn State's offensive line does need to get that cleaned up. Play calling can help affect that as well. So I think the offensive line is still trending in the right direction. They are playing their best football. They certainly got tripped up there. And those, holding calls here and there. Sal Wormley had a couple of mistakes. Those will be left in the Fiesta Bowl. I am not concerned or think that that's a sign of things to come. I think the offensive line is fine in that regard. Just blitz pickup. That's the only thing I'm really worried about right now is blitz pickup against some better defenses. Let's talk about the defense just briefly for Penn State. Abdul Carter banged up, but I really want to highlight the fact that people were calling for Tom Allen's job. And it's kind of the same thing. People are just, I don't know. If you just want to exaggerate, if you really don't like Andy Kotelnicki after the Boise State, I don't let one game define a player, a coordinator, a coach, a team. Giving up 45 points to Oregon. Look, and every game's subjective. I know what Ohio State just did to Oregon. They had a good game plan. They were well adjusted. They were ready for it. Hats off to Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and Jim Knowles. Ohio State looks really good right now, okay? That's understandable. But Tom Allen and Penn State's defense going up against Oregon, sometimes Oregon just has a better game plan. And look at the way that Tom Allen has adjusted. Now, holding SMU to 10 points, Boise State to 14. Boise State was an offense that did not turn the football over. And Maddox Madsen, who had 3 interceptions all season, threw 3 interceptions in the Fiesta Bowl. Ashton Jeanty, who was averaging 150 yards per game, was on the cusp of making history, breaking Barry Sanders' record, and barely got to 100 yards. Called that perfectly on the show. We said that Ashton Jeanty would get to 100 yards, but it would take 30, 35 carries to do so. Was held out of the end zone too. Tom Allen made it his life's mission for this Penn State defense to shut down Ashton Jeanty, and they did. They had creative formations. They did so many things well. They were able to make this Boise State team one-dimensional. And I have a feeling that, yes, we still need to wait on the status of Abdul Carter, but I have a feeling that Penn State is going to develop similar game plans to make it just as difficult for Notre Dame or Georgia in that upcoming semifinal game. Tom Allen is a really good defensive coordinator. That is the biggest takeaway of this all. He's just a good defensive mind. And as the head coach at Indiana, he couldn't be as involved as an X's and O's guy. And he admitted that he likes that he just gets to focus on game planning for football and coaching and just being a defensive coordinator. He likes that his job has become simpler, and it shows. You can have a bad game. It does not define you as a team, but you do in these moments where it's winner take all, you need to be able to show up, and Penn State has shown up defensively against SMU and now Boise State. I know those aren't the best opponents that they're going to face. It's only going to get tougher. There's only going to be more resistance, more friction. Notre Dame, Georgia, and then what's left at the top with Ohio State and Texas. Penn State's going to face the best of the best here, and they get to prove it at this point in time. But I think Tom Allen has really focused now, has the defense in a position to succeed at its best. You want to see Abdul Carter healthy, so we're going to talk about that more in upcoming episodes. Is Penn State going to be able to win with or without Abdul Carter against any of the remaining teams? So that is yet to be seen, but know that Tom Allen is the right defensive coordinator. Oregon's offense is good. Kudos to Ohio State for figuring it out, cracking the code, and shutting them down respectively in the Rose Bowl. I think they were just very prepared for that matchup, but don't read into one performance too much, because overall, Penn State's defense is top 10. Penn State's offense is top 10. You look at the statistics, that is the case. I look at yards per play and yards per play allowed. Penn State is top 10 in both. So that's, for what it's worth, that's where Tom Allen's group is, and Andy Kotelnicki is right there as well. This Penn State team is built for this postseason run, and they're going to be ready to take on Notre Dame, Georgia, and whomever else in Ohio State and Texas. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Appreciate you checking out this episode. Please leave a like on this episode, share it with friends and family, be a part of the conversation down in the comments section. And if you're not already, become an everydayer, subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And once again, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, check out Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. Craig puts the Big Ten first when others seem to overlook it, and with all this playoff discourse, that seems to be the case. You can find Locked On Big Ten available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.